Sarah screamed in labor pain, but nothing hurt more than the HOA president forcing her to strip naked in the hospital room. "Take off your gown or pay $5,000, they demanded. Her husband watched helplessly as his wife cried in humiliation. But justice was coming. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Sarah Miller felt the first strong pain hit her at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. She was 8 months pregnant, and this was not supposed to happen yet. Her baby was coming early. "David," she called out to her husband who was sleeping next to her. "David, wake up. Something's wrong." David jumped up immediately. He had been waiting for this moment for months, but not like this. Not so early and not with Sarah looking so scared. "What's happening?" he asked, turning on the light. "The baby is coming," Sarah said, holding her belly. "The pain is really bad and I think my water broke." David moved quickly. He grabbed their hospital bag, which they had packed weeks ago, and helped Sarah get dressed. Within 10 minutes, they were in their car, driving through the empty streets toward the hospital. Sarah gripped David's hand as another wave of pain hit her. "Drive faster," she whispered. "I'm trying, honey." "We're almost there," David said, though his heart was racing with worry. When they arrived at St. Mary's Hospital, the emergency room was busy even at this early hour. A nurse quickly got Sarah into a wheelchair and rushed her to the maternity ward. "How far apart are the contractions?" asked Dr. Martinez, the doctor on duty. "About 3 minutes," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "Okay, we need to get you into a delivery room right away," the doctor said. Sarah had been in labor for 6 hours. The pain was getting stronger and she was exhausted. David stayed by her side, holding her hand and trying to comfort her. "You're doing great, Sarah. The baby will be here soon," he said softly. Just then there was a loud knock on the door. Before anyone could answer, 3 people walked in. Sarah recognized them immediately and her heart sank. It was Margaret Thompson, the president of their neighborhood HOA, along with 2 other board members, Robert Kim and Linda Watson. Margaret was a tall, thin woman with gray hair pulled back tightly. She always wore expensive suits and looked at people like they owed her money. "What are you doing here?" David asked, standing up. He was confused and angry. "This is a hospital room. You can't just walk in here." Margaret ignored David and looked directly at Sarah, who was in the middle of another contraction. "Mrs. Miller," Margaret said in a cold voice, "we need to discuss your violation of HOA rules immediately." "Are you crazy?" David shouted. "My wife is having a baby. Get out of here." "Lower your voice, Mr. Miller," Robert said. He was a short, fat man who always agreed with whatever Margaret said. "This is official HOA business." Sarah couldn't believe what was happening. Between contractions she tried to speak. What are you talking about?" "Your grass is 2 inches too long," Linda said, reading from a paper. She was Margaret's best friend and always dressed exactly like her. "You received a warning letter 2 weeks ago. The fine is now $500 and it goes up every day you don't fix it." "The grass." David was so angry he could barely speak. "You came to a hospital room to talk about grass while my wife is in labor?" "Rules are rules, Mr. Miller," Margaret said. "The HOA covenant clearly states that grass cannot exceed 3 inches in height. Your grass is 5 inches. Dr. Martinez walked into the room at that moment and stopped in surprise. "Excuse me, who are you people? This is a delivery room. You need to leave immediately." "We are the Oakwood Heights HOA board," Margaret announced like she was the Queen of England. "We have official business with Mrs. Miller." "I don't care if you're the President of the United States," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "This woman is in active labor. You need to leave right now or I'll call security." "We're not leaving until this matter is resolved," Margaret said, crossing her arms. What happened next would stay with Sarah forever. Margaret walked closer to the hospital bed where Sarah was lying, still in pain from contractions. "Mrs. Miller, since you refuse to take our letters seriously, we're implementing emergency enforcement procedures," Margaret said. "What does that even mean?" David asked. Robert pulled out a thick book of HOA rules. "According to Section 47B, when a resident is in severe violation, we have the right to conduct an immediate property inspection to assess damages." "Property inspection?" Dr. Martinez looked confused. "What property? We're in a hospital." "The resident herself is considered part of the property value of our community," Linda said, like she had memorized the words. "We need to make sure she meets our community standards." Sarah had another contraction and cried out in pain. When it passed, she looked at the 3 HOA members with disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely serious," Margaret said. Stand up, please. She can't stand up, David yelled. She's in labor. Then she can pay the daily fines, which are now up to $2,000, Robert said, checking his phone calculator. Dr. Martinez moved toward the phone. I'm calling security right now. Wait, Margaret said, holding up her hand. Mrs. Miller, we're prepared to waive all fines if you comply with our inspection request. Sarah was tired, in pain, and just wanted these people to leave. Fine, whatever. Just make it quick. We need you to remove your hospital gown so we can ensure you're maintaining proper community appearance standards, Margaret said. The room went completely silent except for the beeping of the heart monitor. Even the other HOA members looked uncomfortable. Excuse me? Dr. Martinez said slowly. You want my wife to do what? David's voice was dangerously quiet. It's a standard procedure, Margaret said, though her voice was less confident now. We need to document that residents are maintaining appropriate standards even during unusual circumstances. Sarah started crying. Not from the physical pain but from the humiliation. She couldn't believe these people were asking her to strip while she was in the most vulnerable moment of her life. I won't do it, she whispered. Then the fines continue to grow, Margaret said. They're up to $3,000 now. David looked at his wife, who was crying and holding her belly as another contraction hit. He had never felt so helpless and angry in his entire life. Sarah, don't do it, he said. This is insane. But Sarah was thinking about the money. David had been laid off from work 2 months ago, and they were already struggling to pay bills. They couldn't afford thousands of dollars in HOA fines. I'll do it, she said through her tears. Sarah, no, David said. But Margaret was already moving forward with a clipboard like this was the most normal thing in the world. With tears streaming down her face, Sarah slowly untied her hospital gown. David held her hand tightly, whispering apologies over and over. I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is wrong. This is so wrong, he said. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. I cannot allow this. This is medical negligence and harassment. I'm calling security and the police right now. But Margaret grabbed the phone cord. This is legal HOA business. We have the right to enforce community standards. Sarah was now sitting on the hospital bed in just her underwear, 8 months pregnant, in active labor, crying from both physical pain and emotional humiliation. Margaret walked around her with the clipboard, making notes. Posture needs improvement, Margaret said, writing. Skin tone is acceptable. Hair should be brushed more regularly. Linda took photos with her phone. For the HOA records, she explained. David couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and grabbed Robert by the shirt. Get out. Get out right now. Don't touch me, Robert yelled. This is assault. Linda, call the police. Let go of him, David, Sarah pleaded. Please just let them finish so they'll leave. David let go of Robert, but his hands were shaking with rage. He had never wanted to hurt someone so badly in his life. Margaret continued her inspection for another 10 minutes, taking notes about everything from Sarah's fingernails to how she was breathing during contractions. She asked Sarah to stand up, sit down, and even walk across the room while in labor. Community members must maintain mobility standards, Margaret explained when Dr. Martinez protested. The whole time Sarah cried quietly. She felt like less than a person, like an animal being examined. David held her hand whenever he could, but he felt powerless to stop what was happening. Finally, Margaret finished her clipboard. Mrs. Miller, you passed the inspection. All fines are waived. You may put your gown back on. Sarah quickly put her hospital gown back on, but she couldn't stop crying. The humiliation felt worse than the labor pains. Are you happy now? David asked through gritted teeth. Can you leave? We're done here, Margaret said, like she had just finished a routine business meeting. Congratulations on your upcoming birth. The 3 HOA members walked toward the door, but before they could leave, Dr. Martinez spoke up. What you just did was assault and harassment. I'm reporting this to the police and the hospital administration. We were conducting legal HOA business, Margaret said. You have no grounds to. She was interrupted by the sound of sirens outside the hospital. 20 minutes later, David was still trying to comfort Sarah when they heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The door to the room burst open and 5 police officers walked in, followed by a woman in a dark suit. Police. Nobody move, shouted Sergeant Williams, the lead officer. Margaret, Robert, and Linda, who were still in the room filling out paperwork, looked up in surprise. What's the meaning of this? Margaret demanded. Margaret Thompson, Robert Kim, and Linda Watson, you're under arrest, said Detective Sarah Chin, the woman in the suit. Arrested? For what? Robert squeaked. Sexual harassment, assault, unlawful imprisonment, extortion, and violation of patient rights, Detective Chin said, pulling out handcuffs. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Officers, I called you. These people forced a woman in active labor to undress against her will. They threatened her with financial penalties if she didn't comply. That's not true. Linda protested. We were conducting legal HOA business. Sergeant Williams looked at Linda like she was crazy. Lady, there is no law that gives you the right to make a pregnant woman strip in a hospital room. We have documentation. Margaret said, waving her clipboard. Detective Chin took the clipboard and looked at it. Her expression grew angrier with each line she read. This is evidence of a crime, she said. You documented your own illegal activity. Two officers moved toward Margaret, who backed up against the wall. This is a mistake. We're the HOA board. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Officer Martinez said, putting handcuffs on Margaret. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Robert tried to run toward the door, but another officer caught him easily. Let me go. This is harassment. No, sir, the officer said calmly. What you did to that lady is harassment. What we're doing is called justice. Linda started crying. We didn't know it was illegal. Margaret said it was allowed. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, Detective Chin said. As the three HOA members were let out in handcuffs, Margaret turned back to Sarah one more time. You'll regret this. The HOA will sue you. We'll make your life miserable. Ma'am, Sergeant Williams said, I'd recommend you stop talking right now. Sarah watched from her hospital bed as the people who had humiliated her were taken away. She was still crying, but now they were tears of relief. David squeezed her hand. It's over, honey. They can't hurt you anymore. Detective Chin stayed behind to take statements from Sarah and David. She sat in a chair next to the hospital bed and spoke gently. Mrs. Miller, I know this is difficult, but I need to hear exactly what happened, she said. Sarah, still having contractions every few minutes, told the detective everything. David filled in details when Sarah needed to rest. They made her strip? Detective Chin asked, writing notes. While she was in labor? Yes, David said, his voice still angry. They said it was HOA policy. They took pictures. Detective Chen's jaw tightened. Do you still have those photos, Dr. Martinez? I made them show me the photos before I let them leave the first time, Dr. Martinez said. When I saw what was on the phone, I immediately called the police. The photos are evidence of sexual harassment and invasion of privacy. Good thinking, Detective Chin said. Sarah had another strong contraction, and everyone waited for it to pass before continuing. Mrs. Miller, how long has the HOA been harassing you? Detective Chin asked. About 6 months, Sarah said weakly. It started with small things. They said our mailbox was the wrong color. Then they complained about our car being parked 1 inch over the line. Every week there was something new. Did you ever complain to anyone about their behavior? We tried, David said. We went to City Hall, but they said HOA disputes were civil matters, not criminal ones. Well, they crossed the line from civil to criminal today, Detective Chin said. What they did to you is illegal in multiple ways. Dr. Martinez checked Sarah's vital signs. Detective, we really need to focus on the delivery now. The baby is coming soon. Of course, Detective Chin said, standing up. Mrs. Miller, we have enough information for now. You focus on having your baby. We'll handle the rest. Sarah grabbed the detective's hand. Will they really be punished for this? I promise you, Detective Chin said seriously, these people will face the full consequences of their actions. 2 hours later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Despite everything that had happened, the moment she held her daughter for the first time, all the pain and humiliation faded into the background. She's beautiful, David said, tears of joy in his eyes. What should we name her? Sarah asked, looking down at the tiny face. How about Hope? David suggested. After everything that happened today, she represents hope for a better future. Hope Miller, Sarah said softly. I like it. Dr. Martinez finished checking the baby and handed her back to Sarah. She's perfectly healthy. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. As Sarah held baby Hope, Detective Chin knocked softly on the door. Congratulations, she said quietly. I have some updates if you're feeling up to it. Please tell us, David said. We searched the HOA members' phones and found photos not just of you, Mrs. Miller, but of other residents too. They've been taking unauthorized photos of people in their homes and on their property for months. Sarah's eyes widened. Other people too? At least 12 other families. The HOA was building files on everyone, including photos taken through windows and from private yards. That's horrible, Sarah said. It gets worse, Detective Chin continued. We also found financial records showing they were keeping the fine money for personal use. They weren't even turning it over to the legitimate HOA account. David shook his head in disbelief. So they were stealing too? Embezzlement, fraud, harassment, assault, invasion of privacy, and now we're looking into stalking charges too, Detective Chin said. They're going to be in prison for a long time. News of what happened spread quickly through the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. By the next morning, there were reporters outside the hospital and angry residents demanding answers. Sarah's neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, came to visit with flowers and an apology. I'm so sorry, dear, the elderly woman said. If we had known Margaret was capable of something like this, we would have stopped her long ago. Did you know about the photos? David asked. Not the photos, but we knew she was getting worse, Mrs. Peterson said. She was fining people for ridiculous things. The Johnsons got fined because their daughter drew with sidewalk chalk. The Garcias got fined because their dog barked at a delivery truck. Sarah shifted baby Hope to her other arm. Why didn't anyone complain? We were scared, Mrs. Peterson admitted. She threatened to put liens on our houses if we didn't pay the fines. Most of us just paid to avoid trouble. That's extortion, David said. We know that now, Mrs. Peterson said. The police have been talking to everyone in the neighborhood. It turns out Margaret and her friends were running a criminal operation, not a legitimate HOA. 3 days later, while Sarah was still recovering in the hospital, Detective Chen visited with more news. We've charged all 3 of them with multiple felonies, she said. Margaret Thompson is facing the most serious charges because she was the ringleader. What kind of sentences are they looking at? Sarah asked. With all the charges combined, Margaret could face up to 15 years in prison. Robert and Linda are looking at 5 to 10 years each. David bounced baby Hope gently. Good. They deserve it. There's more, Detective Chin said. The district attorney's office is also pursuing civil rights violations. What they did to you, Mrs. Miller, violated your constitutional rights to privacy and dignity. What does that mean? Sarah asked. It means the federal government might also press charges. And it means you can sue them for damages. Sarah thought about that. I don't want their money. I just want to make sure they can never do this to anyone else. Well, you've definitely accomplished that, Detective Chin said. The whole HOA is being dissolved. The state is investigating HOAs across the country now because of what happened to you. 4 months later, Sarah sat in a courtroom holding baby Hope while Margaret Thompson's trial began. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, reporters, and other people who had been harassed by illegal HOA practices. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Rodriguez, opened his case by showing the jury the photos Margaret had taken of Sarah in the hospital room. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, what you're about to see represents one of the most shocking abuses of power I've encountered in my career. The defendant forced a woman in active labor to strip naked, claiming she had the legal authority to do so. She did not. Margaret's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, tried to argue that his client genuinely believed she was following HOA rules. My client was confused about the extent of HOA authority, the lawyer said. She made a mistake, but it wasn't criminal. But when the prosecutor showed the jury all the photos Margaret had taken of other neighbors, and the financial records showing she had stolen thousands of dollars in fake fines, the argument fell apart. Dr. Martinez testified about what he had witnessed in the hospital room. In 30 years of medicine, I have never seen anything so cruel and unnecessary, he said. This woman was at her most vulnerable moment, and they chose to humiliate her for no legitimate reason. Sarah also testified, with baby Hope sleeping in David's arms in the front row. They made me feel like I wasn't human, Sarah said quietly. Like I was just property they could inspect and control. No one should ever have to go through that. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. Guilty on all counts, the foreman announced. Margaret Thompson was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Robert Kim got 8 years. Linda Watson received 5 years. Sarah's case became famous across the country. Laws were passed in multiple states limiting HOA authority and requiring oversight of HOA boards. The Sarah Miller law in her state made it illegal for HOAs to fine residents more than $50 for any violation, and required all fines to be reviewed by the city government. Sarah and David received hundreds of letters from people who had been harassed by their own HOAs. Many of them used Sarah's case as evidence to fight back against illegal HOA practices in their own communities. "We never wanted to be famous," David said one evening as they sat in their living room, watching baby Hope play on a blanket. "I know," Sarah said. "But if what happened to us can help other people, then maybe it was worth it." The local news station did a follow-up story 6 months after the trial. They interviewed several families in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. "Everything is so much better now," said Mr. Garcia, whose family had been fined for their dog barking. "We actually enjoy living here again. We can park our cars normally, our kids can play in the yard, and we don't have to worry about someone watching us all the time." Mrs. Johnson, whose daughter had been fined for sidewalk chalk, said, "My daughter asks me sometimes why the mean lady was so angry about her drawings. I tell her that some adults forget how to be kind, but that doesn't mean she should stop being creative." A year after Hope's birth, Sarah and David decided to move to a different neighborhood. Not because they were running away from what happened, but because they wanted a fresh start for their family. "Are you sure about this?" David asked as they packed boxes. "I'm sure," Sarah said, watching Hope crawl around the empty living room. "This house has too many bad memories. Hope deserves to grow up somewhere peaceful." Their new neighborhood had no HOA at all. The houses were different colors, the yards had different types of plants, and children played in the streets without anyone measuring the grass or taking photos. "It's perfect," Sarah said on their first day in the new house. Detective Chin visited them a few weeks later to see how they were settling in. "Any regrets about pressing charges?" she asked. "None," Sarah said firmly. "Margaret and her friends were bullies. They needed to be stopped." "You know," Detective Chin said, "I've been a police officer for 15 years and I've seen a lot of victims. Most people just want to move on and forget what happened to them. You could have done that too." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but then they would have kept hurting other people. I couldn't live with that." On Hope's first birthday, Sarah and David threw a big party in their new backyard. They invited all their new neighbors as well as some of the friends they had made from the old neighborhood. Mrs. Peterson came with a beautiful handmade quilt for Hope. "I made this myself," she said proudly. "Every square represents someone from the old neighborhood who was grateful for what you did." Hope, now walking and babbling constantly, toddled around the yard in a pink dress, completely unaware of the difficult circumstances of her birth. "She's going to be strong like her mother," Dr. Martinez said. He had become a family friend over the past year. "I hope she never has to be that strong," Sarah said, watching her daughter play. David put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "If she does, she'll know she has parents who will always stand up for what's right." 2 years after the trial, Sarah received a phone call from a lawyer in another state. "Mrs. Miller, my name is Patricia Clark. I represent a group of residents in Florida who are dealing with HOA harassment. We'd like you to testify in our case." Sarah thought about it carefully. Testifying would mean reliving the humiliation she had experienced. But it would also mean helping other people. "What kind of harassment?" Sarah asked. "Similar to what you experienced but not quite as extreme. The HOA is entering people's homes without permission, imposing ridiculous fines and threatening foreclosure if people don't pay." "How many people are affected?" "Over 200 families," the lawyer said. Sarah made her decision. "I'll do it." Over the next year, Sarah testified in 6 different cases across the country. Each time, her testimony helped victims win their cases against abusive HOAs. "You've become the face of HOA reform," David said one evening. "I never wanted to be famous," Sarah said. "But if my story can help people, then I guess it's worth it." 5 years after Hope's traumatic birth, Sarah was pregnant again. This time, everything was different. She chose the same hospital, but Dr. Martinez had been promoted and was now the head of the maternity department. He personally made sure that Sarah's delivery would be peaceful and private. "No one gets into that room without your permission," he promised. When Sarah went into labor with her second child, a son they planned to name Justice, the hospital had new security policies in place. No one could enter a delivery room without proper identification and a legitimate medical or personal reason. David held Sarah's hand as the contractions got stronger. "Are you scared?" he asked. "A little," Sarah admitted. "But not of the same things. I'm not afraid of being humiliated or harassed. I'm just afraid of the normal things like whether the baby will be healthy." "He'll be perfect," David said confidently. And he was. Justice Miller was born without complications, in a room full of love and respect, surrounded only by people who cared about his family. As Sarah held her newborn son, She thought about how different this experience was from Hope's birth. "What are you thinking about?" David asked. "I'm thinking about how much can change in 5 years," Sarah said. "5 years ago I felt powerless. Today I feel strong." 10 years after the HOA incident, Sarah Miller published a book about her experience. The book, titled Standing Up: How One Woman's Fight Changed Everything, became a bestseller and inspired even more HOA reform across the country. Hope, now 10 years old, sometimes asked her mother about why people were always thanking her when they went out in public. "Mama, why did that lady at the store say you were her hero?" Hope asked one day. Sarah thought about how to explain it in a way a 10-year-old could understand. "Sometimes, sweetheart, adults make bad choices and hurt other people. When that happens, someone has to stand up and say it's not okay. I did that once and it helped a lot of people." "Were you scared?" Hope asked. "Very scared," Sarah said honestly. "But sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared." Justice, now 5, looked up from his coloring book. "Did the bad people go to jail?" "Yes, they did," Sarah said. "And they learned that they can't treat people badly." "Good," Justice said and went back to coloring. Sarah smiled, watching her children. They were growing up in a world where they would never have to experience what she had experienced. That alone made everything worthwhile. Margaret Thompson was released from prison after serving 8 years of her sentence. She moved to a different state and never worked in property management again. Robert Kim served his full sentence and became a maintenance worker. Linda Watson got out after 4 years and moved in with her sister in another city. None of them ever apologized to Sarah for what they had done. But Sarah didn't need their apologies anymore. She had found peace in knowing that she had turned her worst moment into something that helped thousands of other people. And every night, as she tucked Hope and Justice into bed, she reminded them of the most important lesson she had learned. No one has the right to make you feel less than human. If someone tries to do that, you stand up, you speak out, and you fight back. Not with anger or violence, but with truth and courage. "We will, Mama," Hope always said. And Sarah knew they would.